Are the twins from Teyvat? Or were they from Teyvat? Confusing question? Yeah, me too. Let me explain. Ever since Nahida mentioned the concept of descenders in Teyvat, it confirmed that one of the travelers was in fact an outlander that did not belong to Teyvat, while the other one could be from Teyvat considering that they weren't a descender. While that was some confirmation, the Archon quest Caribert mentioned new information about the twins' position in Khaenri'ah. But to conclude if any or both of the twins are from Teyvat, we'll have to start at the very beginning. For the convenience of addressing the twins, let's assume that Aether is our traveler and Lumine is the Abyss sibling. Don't get me wrong, my traveler is Lumine, but with all the promotional material in Genshin being this way, it just makes explaining a little simpler. Now we know that the twins traveled many worlds before they came to Teyvat. Although we've never actually seen this in-game, let's just believe Aether's memories. But why were they traveling? When we meet Lumine during the first We Will Be Reunited quest, Aether wants them to go home. At this point, Lumine says that home is wherever they are together, and that she cannot go with him to the next world to find a new home, which begs a question: what happened to their old home? Or did they even have one? Luckily for us, we might have an answer to that question. According to the description of the Sword of Dissension, the world that the travelers came from was doomed. In this doomed world, humanity was trying to preserve their world, and this sword was drawn to defy that fate of destruction. But the law of the universe was that all who exist must one day perish. The powers that they were against is described as a star-devouring darkness, and it is implied that even though this powerful sword existed, it could not prevent the destruction of this world. Whether this was the world that they traveled to before Teyvat or their home world isn't exactly clear. But before we get into deciphering what the rest of it meant, let's speculate what happened after the twins arrived in Teyvat, considering what we now know about the Princess of Khaenri'ah. There was a lot of ambiguity regarding the time that Aether and Lumine have spent on Teyvat. Before, the Cataclysm of Khaenri'ah, an event that took place 500 years ago, was used to gauge the arrival of the twins, because Aether remembers waking up to the Cataclysm and remembers Khaenri'ah as well. But if Lumine was Khaenri'ah royalty, she should have spent a certain amount of time there, gaining the trust of the people. It is to be noted that Lumine's position in this royalty was pretty high, because she didn't recognize Clothar, who was also nobility in Khaenri'ah, being part of the Alberic clan. This can't be said for sure though, considering a few possibilities. One, we saw Lumine's memories due to the ley lines, but unlike the other instances when we see the entire scene in memories, we were living the moments that Lumine had been through. Aether had his consciousness and even seemed to be making decisions throughout. So it made me wonder, when Clothar revealed he was not either but part of the Alberic clan and that Lumine was in fact the princess of Khaenri'ah, Aether was shocked because he realized that he was reliving his siblings' memories. But did this fact shock Lumine? If she was the princess and remembered it, she wouldn't be surprised by anything Clothar said to her, because she would already know her position in Khaenri'ah, unless she forgot. This is where my doubts about the timelines get even more convoluted. The time that Lumine traveled with dainsleif, did she start traveling the moment they arrived in Teyvat? Or did they travel together first, reach Khaenri'ah, and then experience the cataclysm which led Lumine to wake Aether up to try to leave Teyvat? Well, we do know that Khaenri'ah was Lumine's first destination in Teyvat. Scaramouche, in his interlude quest, tells us that the records of Lumine being in Irminsul might have something to do with Khaenri'ah, and that apparently Khaenri'ah was her first destination, also mentioning that she only came to this world in response to the heavens responding to the summoning. We have yet to learn more about how Lumine was summoned to Khaenri'ah and how that is connected to Irminsul, but let's talk about that another time. So, if Khaenri'ah was Lumine's first destination, it can mean two things. She began her journey from Khaenri'ah, traveled to the rest of Teyvat, at the end of the journey, the cataclysm occurred, or she traveled after the cataclysm. Nahida tells us that Lumine suddenly arrived in Khaenri'ah, and after the disaster that occurred there, she journeyed to the 7 nations of Teyvat. But at the end of the journey, the records in Irminsul become fuzzy. Based on what Scaramouche and Nahida said, there is a possibility that Lumine's records have existed in Teyvat since she arrived. Earlier, I was under the impression that whatever happened to Lumine at the end of the journey, when her record in the Irminsul gets fuzzy, was because her position as a descender changed. Both times, Lumine's arrival has been mentioned. Her journey and presence has been recorded. Nahida knew when she first arrived and her entire journey through Irminsul records. That means she was already a part of Teyvat. If Lumine travelled after the disaster of Khaenri'ah, why did she travel with Dain? If the Khaenri'ah disaster had already passed and she blamed Dain for it, why would she travel with him? If we use the same logic that Clota used, maybe she didn't recognize Dain. Clota said Lumine wasn't expected to know all of them, suggesting that Lumine's position in royalty was pretty high. While it is possible that Lumine did not recognize dainsleif for some reason, she would know that he was Khaenri'ah, and she should have been able to recognize pure-blood Khaenri'ahs from their eyes as well. Also, couldn't Dain recognize her? As the captain of the royal guard, wouldn't he know who she was? While we meet Dain in the chasm, he mentions that both Lumine and him were on a journey to search for their fate, but they did not make it to the end of the journey together. Another thing that Clota mentioned was that pure-blood Khaenri'ahs were cursed differently. For example, Caribert, who was half Khaenri'ah, was cursed to become a Hilichurl, but Clota was cursed with immortality, and the curse also wore away at him slowly. He had his memories intact, slowly losing his mind, but still aware of the cataclysm and Lumine's position as the princess, and also how she was the abyss to Khaenri'ah. If this is the case, how did dainsleif come to lose his memories? He mentions the curse, but even Clotar has the curse. He can still remember everything, while dainsleif's memories have escaped him. In 3.5, he happened to remember the Loom of Fate and the Alberic clan because parts of his memories came back to him. It seems that his curse affected him in a different manner than Clota. But what if Dain remembered Lumine, but she didn't remember him? Or anything? We know that Aether has memories of his sister, and he remembers Khaenri'ah and the cataclysm. But there are gaps in his memories as well. Not to mention, Aether is an unreliable narrator. He knew about Khaenri'ah since the beginning. He even looked for clues regarding it, since it could provide some information about Lumine. But he never shared this information with Paimon, and it is never revealed to us as well. Aether himself questions his memories when it is revealed that Lumine is not a descender. But there is more reason to believe that Lumine lost her memories. In Lumine's memories, after Caribert removes his mask, Clota is unusually happy and begins to tell Lumine about the Loom of Fate. In this scene, he refers to Lumine as Traveler and then goes on to reveal how he knows her true identity, and he's known it for a while, eventually referring to Lumine as the Princess of Khaenri'ah. Why would there be a need for this entire conversation if Lumine already knew her position in Khaenri'ah and their obsession with the Abyss? Why would Clota have to reveal anything at all? Lumine being the princess of Khaenri'ah should be a shock to Aether, but to Lumine, she should have already known this. When we experience Lumine's memories, we are still conscious. We make choices as well, but clearly, the memory had a fixed fate. We couldn't go beyond a certain part of the map. We followed Clota, collected water according to the time he had set, and made medicine for Caribert because it was a ritual. Aether did not question it. He had doubts to deviate from the memory. For example, when he thought about Nahida when Clota mentioned the Dendroarchon, but we never acted on it, eventually reaching the same point where Lumine was. We do not know what Lumine thought or felt when she experienced this, but the fact that this was a revelation to her seems to imply that this information was new to her as well. When Aether tells Dain what happened, he mentions that this incident may have led Lumine into a deep contemplation and made her question everything. If Lumine was like the Abyss to Khaenri'ah, if the future that she promised to Khaenri'ah was controlling the Abyss, why would she have a dilemma at all? She would agree with Clotar. In fact, that does end up happening. She ended up following the path that Clotar set out on, mirroring his opinions on gods, fate, and even the Abyss. But she changed. Lumine says this herself when it is revealed that she is the princess of the Abyss Order in the We Will Be Reunited quest. She says that she has traveled to this world once, and when Aether reaches the end of his journey like she did, he will learn the truth of this world. Even if we assume that she traveled with Dain without her memories, Dain could still know who she was, or just like Lumine, discovered this later on in the journey. If they both were searching for their fate, I wonder what Lumine and dainsleif found that led them to change their respective paths. And I wonder if Aether will find these answers as well, although his approach until now says otherwise. Now, revealing the fact that Lumine was Khaenri'ah royalty, Clota also mentioned that she was like the abyss to them, that she would bring new strength and hope to Khaenri'ah, a wondrous mystery far beyond comprehension and understanding. And Khaenri'ah that hoped to control the abyss, because anyone who controls the abyss can control everything, looked to Lumine to take them to that future. Perhaps Lumine was summoned for this very purpose. They wished to summon a being that could control the abyss. Now, we don't know the extent of what Lumine did in Khaenri'ah, whether she had a role to play in what led to the Khaenri'ah disaster, or whether she tried to save the people of the nation she calls her homeland. Her being royalty also explains why she believes Khaenri'ah to be her homeland, but all of this information still doesn't prove whether Lumine is from Teyvat or not. One peculiar thing about the twins' appearance in Khaenri'ah is that all the records only mention Lumine. The jester also tells Scaramouche that Lumine arrived in Khaenri'ah in response to the summoning. But what about Aether? Did he end up in Teyvat because he was already traveling with Lumine? But how does one twin wake up while the other sleeps until the nation that they arrived in has ended up in ruin, only to be displaced once again? The answers to these questions are hard to find. But let us look at arguments in favor of the twins being from Teyvat, which we hopefully cannot disprove. The abyss in Genshin is constantly referred to as an endless void, something that has not been explored and should not be explored, the depths of which are limitless and unfathomable. Clota compares Lumine to the abyss and does not believe that she would refer to it as sinister because she would understand it. She was the one tasked with leading this nation to the promised future of power that the abyss could offer them. But nothing about Lumine looks like the abyss. At least not before she joined the Abyss Order. Both the twins at their most powerful seemed to wield the power of light. If I saw the twins for the first time and had to place them in one of the realms in this world, I would place them in the light realm. And this is important because when Lumine first arrived in this world, unlike Aether who woke up powerless, she probably still had her powers, wings, lights, and sword included. She even has her sword when we meet her after getting separated. But if she ended up like us when she began journeying, which I spent the entire first part of this video trying to prove, how could she still have her powers? Before we attempt to answer that, the twins being able to control light could connect them to the light realm. But the only creatures associated with that realm are the Vishaps, or the 7 dragon lords that were defeated by the primordial one, and there is no mention of anyone that looks like the travelers in the old texts. The human realm was also a result of the primordial one coming to Teyvat. So how exactly would the twins be from the light realm? It is said that the light realm was also known as the realm of the elements. This realm was host to creatures that could harness the pure primordial elements, known as elemental beings. Currently, the only creatures we know of that are able to harness the primordial elements were the 7 dragon sovereigns. The Vishaps that exist now have evolved far from their pure primordial power. In fact, this needed to be done because the light realm was said to be incompatible with the human realm. These changes weakened the Vishaps, but also made sure that they could exist in the human realm. Vishaps are eventually believed to evolve into dragons. Even though the Vishaps changed, they are still very much elemental beings. The dragons that we know of have physical attributes that suggest their elemental affiliation. Dwalin has a Nemo, Ishtaha has Geo, and the newest dragon that we've heard of, Apep, has Dendro. The ley lines and these elemental creatures affect each other as well. Not to mention, abyssal energy can prove to be extremely dangerous to them. Now, which of these characteristics can we attribute to the twins? Pure primordial elemental power could be what they used when they faced the Sustainer. It does look like they were wielding the power of light. But there is no confirmation for this because we haven't actually seen what the power of the light realm looks like. We haven't witnessed the power of the 7 sovereign dragon lords as well, so we don't have a lot to work with. When Aether first encounters Dwalin, he takes a red teardrop crystal after Dwalin has left, which he later shows to the Knights of Favonius as well, where Lisa decides to look into it. When she tries to touch it though, it hurts her. She believes that the impurities in the crystals and the elemental power that flows through them repel each other. But the traveler, who is also able to wield the elements, is unaffected by it. Obviously, because they don't have a vision, but also because the power they possess does not belong to the human realm. Perhaps a sign of their pure elemental power. Also, elemental dragons and ley lines affect each other. When Dwalin terrorized Mondstadt, it sent the ley lines into disarray. Vishaps that can be found in DOA are capable of drawing energy from ley lines. Aether's grand plan was to absorb energy from Teyvat's entire ley line network to free himself from the Dragon Queller and destroy the entire world. Also, when mining at the chasm occurred, it affected the ley lines and it brought physical pain to Aether. How does this relate to the twins though? Leyline disorders are in almost every domain in Genshin, including the Spiral Abyss, either helping or hindering characters. Some domains buff certain elements, while others drain energy. The line between lore and game mechanics in Genshin is almost invisible at this point, with most mechanics explaining the lore to us. Some of these can even be traced to the beginning of this game. Not to mention, even in the Archon quest, events and story quests, leyline disorders causing illusions and giving us a glimpse of the past or memories has gotten quite common now. In Caribert, we literally lived through Lumine's memories because ley lines were in turmoil. So, if all of this points towards the twins being from the light realm, why are the only creatures that we know of from this realm the Vishaps? None of these records talk about the twins or creatures that could be like them. But what if they existed in Teyvat even before then? We know of the primordial one fighting the dragon sovereigns, making the human realm and even fighting the second who came. The Archon wars are accounted for, but in all of these battles there is one civilization unaccounted for. The ancient civilization that we witnessed, the architecture visible in the chasm, ruins hanging upside down. As dainsleif said, the architecture resembled Khaenri'ah, but appeared to be older from a time that he did not know of. Even when we travel with Clota, we reach the ruins similar to what we've seen in Khaenri'ah in the chasm too, but Clota doesn't identify them as anything, as he had not seen them before. If this civilization did exist and perhaps was home to elemental creatures that could wield pure primordial powers, what happened to them? What if this was the home that the travelers came from? Destroyed, doomed to fail, the home spoken about in the lore of the Sword of Dissension. What if the destruction of that civilization led them to begin their journey in hopes of finding a new home, only to eventually end up back here, but their home doesn't exist anymore, forgotten, lost, and in ruin? Did Lumine discover this at the end of her journey? Is this the reason she fights the gods? For she believes that they were responsible for her home's destruction. When she speaks of her homeland, does she speak of Khaenri'ah or the ancient civilization lost to time? That's it for this video. Thank you so much for listening to my convoluted string of thoughts until now. I have a few more ideas about the Irminsul, ley lines, and even Aether's position in all of this, but I shall save it for after all the lore drops we're going to receive in 3.6. Let me know your own thoughts on this. Do you think the travelers are from Teyvat? Do list your own theories in the comment section below. If you wish to discuss lore or anything else about Genshin with me, I stream at twitch.tv/Pixieebub. I will see you in the next one, and bye bye.